Aloha guys, this is Dr. Tom Walker coming at you again. We're going to continue as usual, our fascinating discussions. Today we're going to talk about tissues and membranes of the human body. All right. There are four types of tissues in the human body. Epithelial tissue, which I'm sure you don't know what that is, connective tissue, nervous tissue, and muscular tissue. Now, many of it's quite complex, but it's all those four. Tissues, groups of cells that are similar to one another in structure and function. Remember, we had in our first lecture, it told a breakdown of how everything builds up, and specialized cells lead to tissues. Histology is not the study of history like you might think. It's the study of microscopic anatomy. Now, here they say the study of tissues, but is in fact the anatomy is a very broad field, and histology is the study of tissues and microscopic anatomy. Again, four major types of tissues: epithelium, like the skin, connective tissue, nerve tissue, and muscular tissue. Okay, there is a great deal of epithelial tissue in the body, guys, and the best example of it is the skin. But also the stuff that lines our cavities and all is a specialized type of tissue called epithelium. This is real important to know. Epithelial tissue, where it's found, formed in large continuous sheets to cover the skin. In fact, it is the skin. Covers the body's outer surface. Didn't we just say that? Lines most of the inner cavities, like our mouth, our respiratory tract, our reproductive tract. And also our digestive tract, too. I don't know why they left that out. What does epithelial tissue do? Protection, like our skin. Absorption, for example, in the gastrointestinal tract. Specialized epithelial tissue absorb our food that's been digested. Filtration, like in the kidneys. Secretion, like sweat glands, or actually a sweat gland is not epithelial. Yeah, it is. Transportation. Believe it or not, guys, the blood is a type of connective tissue involved in transportation. Epithelial transportation, okay. There are a number of different kinds of epithelium. So let's talk about them. There's a flat kind called squamous, and we'll see that word in a moment. They're like floor tiles. Here they are, so they're flat cells. Our skin is made of squamous epithelium. Forms continuous sheets like floor tiles. Outer surface is unattached. Undersurface attached to a basement membrane. This is pretty much true for epithelium in general. It's avascular, which means it depends on underlying tissue for its nourishment and its blood supply, its oxygen and nutrients and so forth. So in other words, the majority of epithelial tissue does not have blood vessels running through it. It gets its nourishment and oxygen through diffusion from the tissues underneath it in the basement membrane. Epithelial tissue is classified according to shape. We mentioned, here's the word, squamous. Some will say squamous, like fish scales. Simple squamous is a single layer thick. For example, the alveoli of our lungs are that, and that allows oxygen and carbon dioxide to pass through very easily. However, many places, like the skin, have stratified epithelium. It's layers of it. The skin is the perfect example. So we have squamous, we have cuboidal. Cuboidal epithelium is shaped like, what do you think? I'll give you a hint. A cube, like this die here. I know, you see, it's a dice. No, a single is die. Or it could be columnar epithelium, in which case it's shaped like a column. Different areas of the body have different highly specialized epithelial. And talking about that, here's our mouth and skin has thick layers of stratified squamous epithelium. Why? Well, if it wears down, you got some thickness. Our airways have pseudostratified columnar. Now, here's what pseudostratified means. It looks like there's two layers, but there's not. Each cell just narrows out, has a little neck on it that gets thin. So it appears to be stratified, but it's not. And that's why they call it pseudostratified. Here, the alveoli, the air sacs in the lungs, again, as we said a moment ago, here's simple squamous epithelium. The ovary has simple cuboidal. Not sure why. I knew at one time. This sort of thing, guys, at one time I knew in great detail, but that was a long time ago. Okay, what else do we have? The bladder has transitional epithelium, the urinary bladder, and that allows it to stretch. The urinary bladder will stretch as it fills with urine until it gets uncomfortable. Then we got to go do something about it. Okay, so there are three kinds: squamous, cuboidal, columnar. It can be a single layer thick, which case it's just called simple, and if it's multi-layered, it's called stratified. In some cases, like in the respiratory tract, it's pseudo stratified epithelium. Okay, layers of epithelial tissue. We've already talked about this, really. Simple is a single layer, and stratified is multi-layer. A place like the skin, guys, or the mouth, where there's a lot of mechanical friction and stuff, will be stratified, and it'll wear part of it. Like in our skin, the outer portion of it is dead tissue, dead cells in the epithelium. Down in the deeper parts of the skin are where the new skin cells are formed. They're forming constantly, and they work their way up until they eventually slough off. We lose a lot of skin cells every day. A great deal of common house dust is our skin cells, dead cells. Nothing wrong with them. It's supposed to do that, but that's what a lot of it is. Okay, glandular epithelial. The function is secretion. There's basically two kinds of glands. We'll go over this in a lot more detail later on when we study the endocrine system. Exocrine glands are like these sweat glands here, shown in the skin. They have a duct that leads to the surface. Endocrine glands are ductless glands. They don't have ducts. D-U-C-T, duct. They secrete into the bloodstream and then in turn it hits target cells. But here's a square of skin. Here it shows the stratified squamous epithelium. This is called the epidermis. Down here's the dermis. Here's the fat on our skin. This is an oil gland. Here's a hair shaft. And these are sweat glands. Skin is extremely complex, guys, a lot more than you might think. We'll talk about that when we talk about the system for all that. Location and functions of connective tissue. Okay, we finished with epithelium. It's very important. You need to know that. There's really a lot more to it, but that's a good, simple overview. Connective tissue, located in blood. Blood is a connective tissue. Now it's liquid, but it still connects parts of the body. In blood, under the skin and bone and around organs is where we find connective tissue. Functions: connection, support, protection, fat storage, transportation. So what are the four? Well, we covered one of them, epithelium. Now we're covering the second one, connective, and also nerve tissue and muscle tissue. Connective tissue, what does it look like? Well, the intracellular matrix. Intracellular means within the cell. It's abundant and it varies from liquid to hard. Most connective tissue is well vascularized, which means it has a lot of blood flow, a lot of blood supply. Now, the exception to that are tendons, which attach muscle to bone, ligaments, which attach bone to bone, and cartilage. And in fact, among other reasons, this is why injuries to these areas are slow to heal up, and in the case of cartilage, may never heal up because they don't have a lot of blood supply. There's pretty much a direct correlation, guys, to the amount of blood flow an area has to how quickly it'll heal up and all. The presence and amount of protein fibers. Now, most connective tissue are protein. Collagen, but you might have heard that before. You see it in commercials and things for like skin creams and supplements, is the most common connective tissue in the body. Elastin, which are stretchable fibers. Reticular fibers, which are little fine collagen fibers. So the most abundant connective protein in the body is collagen. Okay, types of connective tissue. There's loose And then there's dense fibrous, and there's cartilage, bone, and blood and lymph. Loose is areolar, adipose, and reticular. Be familiar with those names, guys. Adipose tissue is fat, of course. Dense fibrous. So some of it is just loose, like if you pack up a package for shipping and you crumple up some paper and put it around it and it just loosely fills the space. And there's connective tissue like that in the body. That's loose connective tissue. There's dense fibrous, which is a lot thicker and stronger. Then cartilage. There's a great deal of cartilage in the body. Yes. The tip of our nose is cartilage. Our ears are cartilage. We have cartilage in our ribs, which called costocartilages, which allows the rib cage to expand when we breathe. The end of most of our bones have a cartilage cap on them, so there's a great deal of it. There's a pair of important cartilages in the knee called the medial and lateral menisci. If they get a chunk tore on them or get ripped in two or something, they often have to be surgically repaired. They just in an adult, cartilage just about will not heal. It's very, very slow. Why? It's almost an inert substance, guys. Hyaline cartilage is the kind that's found at the end of bones. It's slippery, perfectly smooth. Fibrocartilage, elastic cartilage. Cartilage is real important. There's a lot of it. We touched on some of it, but there's quite a bit more. Okay, bone is a type of connective tissue. Bone is the framework of the body that allows the muscles for attachment. And by contracting the muscles, move the bone and give us mobility. It says consume enough calcium. Yeah. Calcium is what makes the bone strong, guys. And there's a very important variety of mechanisms in the body that maintain and make sure there's enough cartilage. Blood and lymph fluid are connective tissues. We know what blood is. Remember we talked about the lymphatic system. I said there's two circulatory systems in the body. They are indeed connective tissues. They may not seem like it. You don't think of something liquid being the same as cartilage, and it's not, but it's still a connective tissue. Okay, so here's dense fibrous connective tissue, like around helping hold the joints and stuff in. These are actually ligaments. Remember, a ligament attaches bone to bone. Here's bone cells. Here's cartilage cells, in this case from the costal cartilages of the ribs. Remember what I said. This portion is cartilage, and it allows the rib cage to expand so we can breathe. Reticular cartilage, shown here around the joints. Adipose tissue, fat cells around here. And areolar or loose, they're shown making up the basement membrane of the skin. The skin is epithelial tissue, but the basement membrane has areolar tissue or loose connective tissue. Fat is our enemy, guys, but not always. We need a certain amount of fat in our body. It protects our kidneys and we have a little fatty apron that hangs over the intestines called the greater and lesser omentum that act as a protective mechanism. So there's a lot of reasons to have it, but it's just unfortunately in modern times, 65% of Americans are either overweight or obese. And that's not good, and I assume it's getting worse. Okay, are there any questions? I guess not. All right, moving on to nerve tissue. Makes up the brain, spinal cord, and all the nerves. Okay, here's a stylized nerve cell. Here's the cell body. These structures are called dendrites. Here's the word. They bring information from other nerve signals, in other words, from other nerves and other areas into the cell body of the nerve. And this is called an axon. Bundles of axons are what we call nerves. Some of them are a couple of feet long. Some of these individual cells are 2 feet long or more. They run from the spine all the way down the leg, for example. Now, there's two kinds of cells, of nerve cells. There are neurons, which are the functioning nerve cell, the one that creates nerve impulses. This is a stylized neuron. Here's the word. And then there are very important glial cells, or neuroglia, that are supporting structures for the cells. And there's about 4 different ones of those. So there's neurons that are the actual functioning nerve cell, but just as important are the neuroglia that have a supporting role in this. Okay, we're out of time, guys. We'll continue with this next time. We'll see you then. Dr. Tom signing off.